The goal is to provide an Indic perspective to a lot of the issues that are happening in today's society. We're here to talk about today, 1893, which is a film from Swami Vivekananda. The pleasure of introducing everyone that's involved in this wonderful project. I'll start with the executive producer, Philip Goldberg. Philip Goldberg is the author and co-author of many books. He's a public speaker, a worship leader, a spiritual counsel, meditation teacher, and an ordained interfaith minister. He's a Los Angeles resident. He co-hosts the Spirit Matters podcast. He leads American Veda India tours, conducts online courses and workshops, and blogs regularly on Elephant Journal and spirituality and health.
Namaskar, everybody. Nice to see you all, and some familiar faces that I'm happy to be with. I just got back a month ago from a month in India, so you're making me feel like I hadn't left. Those of you who know me know that India has a special place in my heart. It's kind of my spiritual homeland, and that the wisdom and the practical teachings of the Hindu Dharma have been a central part of my life for more than 50 years. And when I have had the opportunity to speak about it, and to write about it, and to research deeply the history of how the teachings came to be transmitted to millions of Americans and transform the religious and spiritual landscape of America. I feel blessed and honored to have had the privilege to do that and to continue to do it. Because I think, as and I'm sure many of you will agree, that this transmission from India to the US of the deepest and most transformative and powerful spiritual teachings is one of the most important developments in American history, certainly in American religious and spiritual history. And all the evidence from research of religious surveys and the like over the course of the last 30 or so years indicates support for that. I often give talks titled A Nation of Yogis, because I really truly believe, Americans are moving in the direction that you're all familiar with, of adopting the core tenets of Hindu Dharma, especially the Vedantic and Yogic traditions. So ever since American Veda came out in 2010, I have hoped that somebody would step up and make a film that documents with fidelity and accuracy at least the main and most important features of that history that can fit into a movie, because you can't obviously cover, what I had 350 pages to cover and others have added to. And honestly, ever since the book came out, I had, in the first few years especially, I had people contact me and say, "Oh, I want to make a movie if you're based on American Veda," or I want to make a PBS series or whatever it was. And none of that ever came to fruition. People Well, it was Hollywood. And people don't always walk their talk and don't always follow through. And in some cases, there was some significant effort, but the circumstances and funding just weren't going to happen. So when I was first contacted by Nico and Stash several years ago, I took it with a grain of salt. And they wanted to make a movie focused on the life and legacy of Vivekananda. The second part, the legacy, would be essentially what I covered in American Veda, truncated, of course. And since they lived in LA, I found it was convenient enough and enjoyable enough for me to have a series of conversations with them over time, during which they picked my brain and I tried to feed them and orient them as much as I could to what I think is the important content of such a film, and offer to help out as much as I could and be available to them. And honestly, I did not know whether they would follow through or anything real would come of it, but it was fun and I respected them. And then over time, I came to see and admire their persistence, because they kept at it and they actually got things done and started to interview people, and including me, and take footage and develop their script and work through the process. And I came to see over time something that was always important to me, which is that they had genuine respect for the tradition of knowledge and teachings and the luminaries, the great leaders, especially, of course, Vivekananda, who represented the teachings and brought them to people like me, and a love for India. And that was important to me because there would have been limits on how much I would cooperate if I didn't think they were coming to the project with integrity and a deep regard for the content, and we're not going to distort it or corrupt it or present it inaccurately for the wrong reasons, which is always a concern in these things. And so over time, they won me over, and then when they brought Chris aboard, I saw that that took the seriousness of the project to another level, because Chris had experience making documentaries over a long period of time and understood the business end of filmmaking in a different way. And I saw that he had the same kind of respect and dedication. So that's when I thought, well, it's one thing to have conversations about the content and the history and all the things I filled my brain with over the course of decades, and always loved talking about. And it's another thing to introduce them to people in the Hindu community and potential funding sources. Because, of course, I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to waste anybody's time. But at a certain point, I came to trust them, all three of them, and the respect that they had, that was evidence to me, and felt confident that they would not only persist and get the film made, but would produce a product that I would be proud to be associated with, and that represented with integrity and dignity the teachings that are so dear to me, and I think so important for the rest of the world. And so here I am. I agreed to help out, and I'm delighted to be invited to this by my friend Praveen, and happy to be with you all. And I know that you'll be suitably impressed by the presentation to come, and enjoy.
My name's Chris Panizzon. I'm one of the producers of 1893, and I'll give you a little bit of background on me and how I got involved in the project, and what I'm passionate about with this project, and what this project has in common with others of mine. So I'm a film producer. I've produced over 25 films. I've worked for the studios, including Warner Brothers and CBS. I've worked for the independents, all the big producers who have had films that gone on. All my films have gone on to Sundance, to premiere at Sundance, to premiere at Toronto, to premiere at Berlin, Tribeca, South by Southwest. The films that I seem to have in common have a high level of artistic integrity. About 7 years ago, I switched exclusively to making documentaries. And now documentaries are the only thing that gets me up in the morning. And I'll tell you why. And I would say it has a lot when I listened to the introduction on the mission of Indic Dialogue, that resonated with me so much, because I know from that introduction that what we're doing here is not only honoring a culture, a dharma, a religion, but we're also and I heard these words, we're working towards problem solving some of the hard, difficult issues in front of our society. I heard that we're focused on things like social justice, and even tackling topics that are, from religious persecution to climate change. And so what as a common thread in the films that I like to attach myself to is having a high level of artistic integrity, and then having a call to action that usually has some sort of reverberation of a consciousness call to action or a justice call to action. But it seems to me that it aligns fairly well with what the Indic Dialogue community is interested in. So, for me, I started my project. You'll hear from the director soon on, what is 1893? But I figure that I'm kind of like one of the target audiences of 1893, of this movie, when this film gets released. Now, I don't have the same level of expertise that Philip has. I don't have the same studied background and education that Nico, the director, and our other producer, Stosh, has. I have what is a expertise in making sure films get completed, that films get put into the highest pedestal and get released into the world. And then what I do in particularly is I make sure these films connect with audiences. And the way you connect films with audiences is you can't just release it on the internet and hope that people come and see it. What you have to do is you have to build an impact campaign, a community screening campaign. That means partnering with organizations like Indic Dialogue, where we watch the film together as a community, and then we host a Q&A, and we have a panel discussion, and we invite other esteemed, scholars and leaders. And that way, the film, while it's so important, I have one mantra that I always say. It's not about the movie, it's about the movement. It's about what we're doing and building together. So if we are sharing the Dharma, the religion, the spirituality, the connection with God, how are we, I'm not sure science alone is going to be able to tackle the problems in front of us. I think we're going to have to also rely on spirituality and God to help, and community and involvement. So this film, for me, is foundational as a social justice piece of work, because when we just got back from India and we were filming there for the last 3 weeks, the one takeaway that I had was from one of our scholars and art historians that we had interviewed, and I believe this to be true in my heart of hearts, that India is the spiritual storehouse for the world. India is the spiritual storehouse for the world. And you know what? There are a lot of Americans, which our film is going to concentrate, because we have to contain this film somehow, right? We're going to talk about Swami Vivekananda's arrival in Chicago, which is where I am right now. I am just a few blocks away from the Art Institute where he spoke. I'm so privileged to be here in Chicago and feel his presence right now. But what I'm telling you is, I don't think Americans are aware of the surprising and unexpected ways in which the Dharma from India has entered their culture and lifted this society. And we're going to start looking at that at the turn of the century, in the surprising way in which Swami Vivekananda had impact on our leading industrialists of the time. I mean, the biggest turn of the biggest names, from Ford to Vanderbilt to Tesla, the biggest names, the impact that was had right then. And I don't think Americans know that. I don't think Americans know, if we fast forward, the surprising connection that our entire American civil rights movement has had with India. I don't think that Americans know that Martin Luther King and his wife went to India to study the ways of civil disobedience and nonviolent communication from India, from the spiritual storehouse to the world. And then we're going to fast forward again, and we're going to look at all the different ways in which today solutions that schools are having trouble with, anxiety that's rampant amongst children in elementary school to high school, the ways in which they're now teaching just the simple postures of yoga to create calm and focus and mental health. So you can imagine this incredible tracing we're going to do from Swami Vivekananda's arrival in Chicago to all these pivotal social and cultural moments in Americans' history and the impact that's had. And we're going to shed light on that. And I think that's going to be incredibly engaging to see this affect our pop culture, our mental health, our wellness, our civil rights movement. So that's the work. That is what ultimately attracted me to this project. I was a donor, and I asked, may I also become a producer, because I'm so committed to seeing this film through. I thank you so much for including us. It is a huge honor to be introduced to this community. We've met Praveen over the last several months and his colleagues, and it's been a wonderful exchange and dialogue and relationship that's building here. It's important that when we're making a documentary, that we engage with the audience in the process of making the documentary, because it is an iterative process. We're getting learnings and teachings as we go, and those learnings and teachings as we go will end up in the film, because a documentary doesn't have a script like a traditional narrative film has. So it's based on the interviews and the filming, and as we go, and the teachings and the learnings, they all get baked and presented in the final film. So thank you. We want to invite your questions and anything else you have. And it's my honor now to introduce my fellow filmmakers as well, Nico and Stash.
Namaskar, namaste, everyone. Thank you. What a real great honor and pleasure it is to be doing this I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing on a Sunday morning. And to hear Phil G and Chris G and the way that they introduced the project, it just makes my heart sing to see how something that was conceptualized 5, 6, 7 years ago, how it's really coalesced, and it's happening, and it really brings me so much joy and pleasure. We will share a teaser that we did some time ago, about 2 years ago. We developed this teaser. We're now in post-production, so there will be further previews and teasers and things, nice media coming along, but I will share that. But let me just give you a little bit of background to the project and where I'm coming from in making this film. The first thing, as I listen to everybody, and I know the community that I'm talking to today, I really think it's important to state that from the very beginning of this project, I've known and understood that it's crucial that at every step of this project that we work with, from the financing to the creative to the vision, the teachings, the whole thing needs to be underpinned by the Indian community, because I am a Westerner, and so I came to these teachings. I clearly have some samskaras from the Hindu Dharma, because I'm 46 years old now. When I was 15, 16 years old, I came across the beginning of these teachings, and I really haven't stopped ever since. And so as soon as I came across the words of the Hindu Dharma, that God is inside and all of these things, it lit a flame that for me has been going ever since. But we are telling your story. This is the story of modern India in many ways. And I even go so far as to think of Swami Vivekananda as a condensed version of modern India. And that's one of the things that I keep in mind as we work and as we write and as we conceptualize how to bring this massive topic of the life and legacy and teachings of Swamiji into what I like to think of as a 108-minute film. It's a huge task. And so I rely on my own sadhana, my relationship to the gurus, and also help from the Indian community to keep us on track. It's such a great, wonderful privilege and honor of my life, really, to be doing this work. As Chris mentioned, we just got back from India. We were there for about 3 weeks, and we filmed in Kolkata. We filmed at Belur Math. We filmed at several temples. We did several interviews. We filmed in Rishikesh and Varanasi, and it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And we really are starting to amass a good amount of footage. Over the past several years, we have conducted interviews with some of the greatest names in Vedanta and the Hindu Dharma. Most of you probably know Swami Sarvapriyananda from New York. He was interviewed. We interviewed him. Swami Tyagananda in Boston. Swami Sarvadevananda in Los Angeles. Swami Mahayogananda, Vraja Prana, Divyananda Prana, who's based in New Delhi and who I think is amazing. Many, many others. Philip Goldberg, Richard Schiffman, who wrote a beautiful book called Ramakrishna, Prophet for a New Age. Jeffrey Long. So we have a very robust list of people who we've already interviewed and who support the project. We also have interviewed artists and musicians and all sorts of different people with different perspectives on Swamiji and the teachings and how they relate to the life that, us Westerners are living in America today. It's such a fascinating and compelling story. And so, little background. I have been working in the film trade for 20 years, and so as I mentioned, I came across the Hindu Dharma in my teen years, and that started a process of investigation. And so, the early books were Deepak Chopra books, and then I started diving in to everything I could get my hands on, and Tibetan Buddhism and different sects and traditions within Hinduism. And then ultimately, about 15 years ago, I was introduced to Sri Ramakrishna, who everybody knows is Swamiji's guru. And he really, my search kind of ended with Sri Ramakrishna. As I like to say, all of my questions have been answered. And through the teachings of Thakur, of Ramakrishna, what I like to say is that I see the path to the top of the mountain. It's very clear path. I don't know if I'll walk that path to the peak in this lifetime, and that's okay. It really is okay with me. I'm very clear on the work that I want to do in this incarnation of mine, and that is to, as a Westerner who I really feel like I'm like, you know, Phil G said in the beginning, I really feel as though I have one foot in the East and one foot in the West, and so I think I'm able to, and you know, it's an artistic expression. I'm able to bring something to artistically to show how the teachings and these amazing stories that come out of India, how they've influenced all of us in the West, not just from a sociological perspective, but also what it can do for the individual being. Because in the end, we are just a society of individual beings. And so the change must start from within. And there are so many paths within the Hindu Dharma that Swamiji in his 4 yogas so beautifully and brilliantly lays out, that every single one of us, depending on our particular makeup and samskaras, we can find a home in one of the 4 yogas. And so to bring all that to the screen in an artistic way it's just so much fun too. You know, it's so much fun to be able to take these concepts and bring them artistically to film and to share them with a Western audience. Already, as I, you know, even with Chris and other people that have started to come along on the project, I already see how they respond, how people respond when they hear and learn of these stories, which are your stories. And so this is the first of what I like to think of as many projects in this vein of bringing the Hindu Dharma to a Western audience through cinema. I think we have a beautiful team placed to do that. I also like to say that, you know, even if we had the funding to do as many films as I have in my mind that I think would be great films, I wouldn't have the time in the rest of my life to do that. So there are so many wonderful projects and stories that I've already started to kind of frame out, because this particular film, 1893, The Year of the Yogi, Life, Legacy, and Teachings of Swamiji, this will be done, you know, in about a year. I think we will release in about a year's time, if all goes well and the funding comes through as we're hoping it does. And then we move on to the next one. And so it's really a great privilege and honor to be in this position, and to have been taken in and trusted by the Hindu community is a deep blessing, and it's not something that I take for granted. So with that, of course, we'll take any questions, but let me show you the teaser. And also, just for fun, I will also show you guys, so Life, Legacy, and Teachings of Swamiji. Of course, Swamiji was born in 1863 and he left the body in 1902. And there's so many wonderful parts of that story. You know, he left on July 4th and he wrote a beautiful poem about July 4th, and he loved America, all these neat things that are going to come out in the film. But, you know, we have photos of him, but we don't have much footage. So as we don't have any footage. So as we tell the life story of Swamiji, which is a hero's journey, so many ups and downs and so much sacrifice, and so loaded with emotional content that I know an audience is going to respond to. And that's an important point. This film is going to rely on techniques that really engage some. This is not a class, it's a story. And so we want to emotionally engage an audience. My goal is that when whoever watches this film, we incite some curiosity, that the next morning they wake up and as they're having their tea, you know, they think back and they say, well, let me take another look and see. And they start to go down, you know, the rabbit hole. That's what I hope. So anyway, to make a long story short, part of the film will be animation, and we are very happy to be working with a team of animators in Kolkata that we've been talking to for some time, about several months now. And when we were in India just now in Kolkata, we spent time with them. And I have to share with you also just some initial drawings and what we call keyframes of certain scenes. The colors aren't perfect; we're not there quite yet, but it will give you an idea of what we're talking about. So first, I'll play the little teaser for you, which just gives kind of a feel for the style. One thing I really like a lot is to film in 8mm, actually on film, on the celluloid, I think that it gives a kind of a richness and it plays to the historical aspect. So you'll see some of that in the teaser. So that's just a little, a little fun teaser that we put together to give an idea of the style. We've come quite a way since then because we've captured so much footage and so many interviews. I think that I think it's going to be really exciting to see what keeps coming. So again, the animation, it will be moving animation. It will be proper animation, watching and with voice and so forth. These are just keyframes that we stylistically to start understanding the style of how we want the characters. What we chose, continuing with the theme, which it will be a running theme throughout the whole film for music and for all of our choices. It's a combination of East and West, because as we know, when Swamiji came here to America in 1893, before the Parliament of Religions, he spent some time at the World's Fair, and he was so impressed with the technological prowess of the West. He really had an enlightened moment where he understood that we must take the best from the East and the best from the West. And so this, best of the East and best of the West, this combination of East and West is where the nectar lies. And so one of the choices that we made with the animator, as we were talking stylistically, was there's an artist, his name is Jamini Roy. He's a contemporary of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. He's from Kolkata. He's a Bengali artist from the 19th century. And he has a very stylized, beautiful stylized interpretation of characters. And so we took him as Jamini Roy as one of our artistic inspirations, and also Vincent van Gogh. So a little bit of that abstract Starry Night feel. So I think it's going to be really quite beautiful. Yep. So here we go. This is the British. This is context of the style and the times. And then if we keep moving to the next image, you'll see this is a representation of the beginnings of British colonial rule in India. It's late 1700s. And this is Swamiji being born. So you can see the stylized eyes. Again, the colors, we're going to be working on that and so forth, but I think it's nice. We're going to pay really, really close attention to detail with regard to even the lighting fixtures and the way that they would have worn the saris and the gamshas, and all those details will be paid attention to stringently. Okay, you can next one. Yep. Okay, here we have Swamiji being taken care of by his mother, and young Naden in study. Next one. Okay, so here this is Naden. As you know, he met Ramakrishna. The first time he met him, he was playing music for him at a gathering. And so music is going to be an important part of obviously a very important part of the film, an exciting part of the film, between Swamiji's own compositions, baul music, kirtan of different sorts, and then Western music. Obviously, George Harrison and the Beatles coming across the Hindu teachings and putting, for me, the song My Sweet Lord, which came out in 1970, which has Westerners chanting, along with saying Hallelujah, they're saying Hare Krishna. These things are major sources of introducing Westerners to the Hindu Dharma. So music is very important. Next slide. And this is Naden and some of the other devotees talking to Ramakrishna at the Dakshineshwar Kali temple, where most of their lila took place. Next slide, please. Okay, this is Thakur Sri Ramakrishna with, this is a bit stylized and we'll work on it, but with Ma, Kali, and of course Shivji on the ground there. Okay, next one, please. And this is just a close-up of Ramakrishna with Kali. So, you know, as I mentioned, initially, and here's Swamiji on the stylized version of him on Vivekananda Rock. Obviously, it's very stylized, but it feels a little bit Buddhic in nature, which I also like because Swamiji was quite devoted to Buddha. Next slide. I think that might be it. Oh, and here's Swamiji at the Parliament. So, and I think that's it. Oh, and here's when Swamiji goes back to India, also very important. When he goes back to India, and let me just touch on this for a minute. When he goes back to India as a hero in many ways, and he's accepted, and he really, one of the things that I think is not talked about very much is how when Swami Vivekananda returns to India, when Swami Vivekananda returns to India after his first trip to the West, I think something really profound and important takes place there, because he comes back as a hero, and the Indian youth who have been obviously under British rule for so long, something happens because when the British see that America has accepted and loved Swami Vivekananda, and the British have a reverence for America, it starts to shift the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. Because when Vivekananda comes home to India and the youth start to rally around him, and Vivekananda, I mean, you can't read two of his sentences without feeling a sense of pride swelling in your being. You can't. You can try. You can't read two of his phrases without feeling, you know, power and strength from the Upanishads and so forth. So when the Indian youth, and you know, we all know that National Youth Day is Swami Vivekananda's birthday, because he really inspired the youth to take pride in themselves again. And when the British started to see that America loved Vivekananda, it created a crack in the glass, in my opinion, for the occupation. And so I even like to say, you know, of course, I mean, there are others who come before, but Swamiji's work in America really starts in a powerful way the beginning of the end of British occupation. So these are different themes that we'll touch on to a lesser or greater extent. We only have a certain amount of time in this film, but it's quite possible that after this film comes out, we could do a 10-part series, an 8-part series, and go really deep into different areas of this story. All that will be determined with, you know, Mother's grace on how that needs to move forward. And then the last thing I'll say, which I was alluding to before, is, so I am a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. And so when I first started to think about this project, for me, this was it always was, and it continues to be, this is an act of devotion and of homage to Thakur, to my guru. And so I started to make a film. I wanted to make a film about him, about Ramakrishna. And I started to do that. And for a year or two, I was writing and thinking, and it was all about that. And then over time, it really became very, very clear to me that if this film is for a Western audience, then the natural entry point to this story is through Swami Vivekananda, because he came here, and his is an amazing immigrant story. And it's such a powerful and rich story. And it involves everybody in America, whether or not they know it. They are attached and linked to Swamiji. So I think, and you know, and you can't tell Swami Vivekananda's story without touching on Sri Ramakrishna. So I think it's a great solution. I think it touches all the areas that we are hoping to highlight. And you know, with that, I'll say that I've probably spoken enough, and we're here to answer any questions, and just really appreciate the acceptance from all of the Hindu community. And I feel very honored and blessed to be doing this work. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I'll turn it over to Ashish Ji to give the vote of thanks and to thank all of our speakers.
Thank you, Philip Ji, Nico Ji, and Krish Ji for taking on such an amazing project. definitely this will reignite the story of Swami Vivekananda in United States and also in India. Thank you for the Praveenji and Ritviji for organizing and coordinating all of the activity. And thank you to everyone for giving your Sunday for such a noble cause. As Rakhiji and mentioned, please donate wholeheartedly for such a great cause so that we can continue to fund this project. And also, please visit the Indic Dialogue website to know all about the other activities and other initiatives that we are pursuing as well. Again, thank you very much, and look forward to continuing to support this project.
And if I might also just, on behalf of all the filmmakers of 1893 or Yogi, we really are very honored to present the project to all of you. And you can get our contact information from Indic Dialogue if you have any follow-up questions or any clarification is needed. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you.